Hello, and thank you for joining me on this podcast from Experience, the Grief Collection. I'm your host, Bianca Welsh. I'm a mum, a lost mum, a restaurateur with a behavioural science degree, and a proclivity for all things to do with trauma, grief, and mental illness. I've got a lot of personal lived experience, and this is the podcast I wish I had after experiencing my own grief and loss. So why would I do a grief podcast? What might I add to the vast podcast world? I'll provide you with stories that might help you feel seen, feel less alone in what you're experiencing or have experienced, perhaps an idea on how to navigate the healing journey, because there's no playbook for grief. There's no guide. We all grieve differently, thus we all heal differently. Perhaps you're helping support someone on their grief and loss journey. Maybe you're just curious about how some people overcome the worst time of their lives. The thing with grief is that this is the one given in life. It is the one thing we will all experience at some point, the loss of someone or something that we love. As the great wordsmith and musician that is Nick Cave quotes in a letter to a fellow griever, if we love, we grieve. That's the deal. That's the pact. Grief and love are forever intertwined. Grief is the terrible reminder of the depths of our love, and, like love, grief is non-negotiable. End quote. Yet we rarely talk about it in the Western world. We're never prepared for it, but perhaps we can never be prepared for it. I wasn't, but I hope if we were more open to talking about it and aware of other people's journeys and stories, we might feel less alone in the dark depths of grief, and perhaps the healing journey might not feel as daunting. Just a heads up, in this episode we talk about some sensitive topics, including baby loss, birth, stillbirth, termination for medical reasons, feticide, suicidal thoughts, and experiences of trauma. If you're not in the right headspace for that today, maybe come back another time. If anything in this episode brings up difficult feelings, please reach out to someone you trust or one of the supports listed in the show notes. I acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the original owners of this island, Trawana Lutruwita, Tasmania. I'm on the country where the Taranata Panir, Paninaher and Lita Myarina clans of the Stony Creek Nation converged. I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise the deep connection to the land and waterways. I express my gratitude in being able to live, work and play on this beautiful country. Sovereignty was never ceded. I honour the rich tradition of storytelling as a vital way of passing down knowledge, culture and history through generations. Today we get the absolute pleasure of speaking with Melody West. Melody is a Launcestonian born and bred who spent a fair portion of life off the island but was drawn back and studied here. She met her partner Nick and has two beautiful boys and dogs. Two dogs, yes. In plural. She recently left an academic career of 20 years and has moved into a role with the Department of Health. Welcome, Melody.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you for such a lovely introduction and a really nice acknowledgement of country.
So thank you so much for joining me and having a chat about the taboo topic that is grief.
Taboo it is, isn't it?
It is. So I guess let's start with your lost journey, wherever you would like to start.
Thank you. Such an important conversation to have, and what I really respect about the work that you're doing through this podcast and through other formats is actually bringing that conversation to the fore in what feels like, in my experience, a really normal part of my life journey so far. I guess my first experience of real loss was the loss of my dad, who died when he was 51 years old and I was 24. I was living overseas and I had been travelling on a bus through Europe, as one does when they're around 19 years old, or a bit older than that, sorry. And he had brain cancer, and I was staying in a hostel and I received a phone call, and it was Mum, and she said, "You need to come home, something's happened." And then we decided that I wouldn't come home, that Dad would undergo surgery and recovery and live a long and prosperous life, as he thought at that time. So he went through that process and I continued to travel and live overseas. And then I was on another trip. I was in India, in the very northern part of India, and one phone in the village pretty much, and that rang one day, and then half of that village, it seemed, came running, calling out my mum's name. And so I thought, this is strange, and this is for me. And yeah, Dad had taken certainly a turn for the worst, and the medical profession had said that yes, he's really got a limited time. So I came home then, and I was lucky enough to have a couple of months with him, but unfortunately he didn't really know who I was. He didn't have sort of cognition at that point. So I just got a really lovely couple of months of supporting Mum and being with family throughout that process and being there for his death. And so at a young age, 24 I was when he died, nobody else that I knew had lost a parent. Certainly people had lost grandparents and pets and things. And so it was an interesting time, obviously devastating, I think particularly because he was so young and that I was overseas and didn't get extra time with him. You know, you feel like you've got forever, but yeah, it wasn't to be. But as time moved on, I just kind of felt this real essence of having something extra in my armour as a result of going through grief and loss and the death of my own father. And that continued on with me as part of, I guess, my fabric for life and the things that I might offer to others at the point through which they're going through their own grief journeys.
I find that really interesting. I've been grappling with that a bit at the moment, this concept of you're almost more whole or you're more. And I completely agree with it. But I get really torn with it because you wish that never happened. You'd prefer, I know I would prefer for my loved ones to be here instead.
Of course.
But that is not the case.
Yeah.
So I find it a challenging concept to accept.
Yeah, that's a really great reflection. There seems to be some sort of juxtaposition, isn't there? Because in one way, our life and everything that it brings fuels us with new information and new ways of being and maybe new ways of being resilient or strong or empathetic. But yeah, it's not a gift that I would like everyone to have.
No, but it is a gift.
Yeah, it is a gift. And perhaps it's when you get that gift who has given you that gift. The loss of who has given you that experience might actually be quite different depending on who it is that you've lost and at what stage of your life you've lost those loved ones. So, yeah, I get that sense that it's not like, oh, lucky you've got these new skills because you've lost someone. It's not quite like that.
No.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people looking out might look in and think that is the case.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it's not the case.
No.
And it's certainly not how I wish to express it. But there was certainly a sense that there was new information in me. It's an embodiment of loss and grief that happened quite early in my life and I think is quite specific with the loss of a parent as well. I just felt like it was something not empowering even, but just something new that I could draw upon throughout life, and certainly I've had to.
Yes, yep. And so then that leads us to then the next part of your loss journey. I mean, all the life that happens in between that, but then to lose your mum.
Yeah, that's right.
Did anything, before we go into that, having lost your father, do you think anything prepared you for then losing your mum? Or was it almost completely different, experiencing it all almost like it's brand new?
I think it felt very brand new. And I guess, each loss is different and the way that we grieve is different. And different for different people, and it's different as per when time moves on and memories and things might spark different grief responses. But certainly losing Dad didn't feel preparatory in losing Mum. And I feel like there was more trauma associated with the loss of Mum, mostly because she had cancer as well, but her cancer was sort of worn on the outside of the body, so it was in her knee and it was very physical and apparent, and it wasn't very nice. No.
And so how did that journey play out for your mum?
Well, in about 2015, I was pregnant with my second child, and she had a really sore knee. And she thought she had bursitis, and she had a number of sort of interventions, I guess, from physios and various other health professionals to try and rectify what was going on. It felt very hot and a bit swollen and red, but, you know, she was a really active woman and very healthy, so just continued on with her life. And I think eventually it kind of got the better of her, just like, you know, something's going on here. And she was away on a holiday as well and received a phone call from her GP to say, this is a very nasty soft tissue sarcoma cancer and you need to come home immediately and have it addressed. And so she undertook a huge surgical procedure with 2 surgeons to basically cut it all out as best as they could and do some plastics in putting skin back over the knee. And they always knew they didn't get all of it out. They did the best job they possibly could, and they weren't sure then whether it had metastasised to the rest of her system. So it's a slippery little bugger, this soft tissue sarcoma, because it can come up anywhere in your soft tissue, and it's a bit of a rare cancer. So that happened. Her surgery was pretty much a week or, 3 days or something after I had a caesarean section with Sailor, and we always have great strength in humour in our family, and we were celebrating the cut off your lumps week or whatever we called it, mine being a baby and hers being a huge cancerous tumour. So that stuff got us through. Mm-hmm. And again, I think the same optimism as well that we had when Dad had his surgical procedures to remove brain cancer. You obviously go to a place where you're like, this is going to be okay and she will survive this. And immediately after, she was walking and doing all sorts of incredible feats and was very optimistic, actually. And as time went on, unfortunately, she had 6 monthly scans and all of those sorts of things. And the cancer has definitely remained. So she passed away in 2018.
I'm so sorry for the loss of both your parents.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you feel, like, I know some people talk about feeling orphaned. Do you hate that term? And does it feel like that for you?
It's a really interesting one. Sometimes I feel like that, and it's mostly as I've grown older and gone through things of my own, wanting to talk to your parents about that gives me that real sense of feeling orphaned, because sometimes it's your parents the only people you can turn to for particular things, or you feel like they're the right audience for you to, air your grievances. But my belief system is that they're with me always, and I continually have a sense of that with both of them at various times and through various ways. So I don't feel that emptiness, I think, perhaps, of thinking that they're not accessible to me in some way. And I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, and I don't really mean for it to sound like that, but I just energetically have a sense that I can sort of tap in to have a conversation. And I do all the time.
I love that. Were you spiritual before your losses, or is it something that you found?
I think I've always had a deeper connection to something, and I'm also very science-brained, so it's a hard position to be in, but I think I've been through enough loss and grief but have had enough evidence of some form of connection to think that, and to be warmed by the fact that I feel like I have them with me in some way, shape or form. And it's a form that suits me perfectly fine.
I love that. I was very not spiritual at all, and going through my own loss, I have become a lot more woo-woo.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised by it, because I'm the same, a very sciencey brain, and I want the evidence and
that's
the
right.
research to back it up.
Yeah.
And I think, I like that concept of the warmth, because I think if that's what gets you through, that's what gets you through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the term spirituality and spiritual has so many connotations, and often they're quite negative, and, as a woman with a crystal ball and all those sorts of things, or people think you're mental talking to dead people. But that narrative and that kind of connection, I guess from a psychological perspective too, it's just part of how you're managing your grief, isn't it? Well, it certainly is for me. And if you get any other little bonus signs along the way, then that I don't know, that's just really special.
Absolutely. Do you have particular signs from your dad and your mum?
We do, I do. They're ones, because my children were quite young when my mum died too, I wanted to keep some memory alive of her. And so whenever we see a rainbow, we always call it a Granny Robbie. And I love hearing my boys point that out all the time. There was a huge rainbow the day she died, and we had to drive down and tell my grandfather, who was still alive then, that his daughter had died. And then I continually saw images of them throughout the next week or so, and so we've just held on to that bit of imagery as a point of reflection for her. Yeah, it is really nice.
Reflecting on your grandfather, it's just not the rule that we're told about how life is meant to work, is it? And I think that's what can be really discombobulating about grief.
Yeah.
Is when you lose someone that's not kind of in the formula of what we've been sold.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
To bury your own child at any age, I think is...
Yeah, really difficult.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It felt jarring. Yeah. And he was unwell at the time too. And my mum's mum had just died. So within sort of 18 months, I lost basically that sort of the female side of the family, and people I was incredibly close to, but they were in their 90s and mum was only 66. It's the laws of life that don't happen in the order we think they're going to happen
They don't. And I think as you get older, you realise how young they actually were.
Well, that's right.
Are you reflecting?
I'm on the precipice of 50.
Yeah.
And so thinking about the potential of dying at 51 is horrific. And the reflection that that's when my dad died, when he was just getting ready to go and live life in a different way. They were planning on going to England to watch the World Cup. He was English. He was born in Nottingham. The rugby, and they just didn't get to do those things together. The kids, we'd all just left home and pursuing our own lives, so freed up sort of space to be doing new things. So I think what it is a great motivator for me to try and embrace life and live an expansive life where I can. Obviously, when you're a parent with a full-time job and kids, expansive life sometimes doesn't look that expansive, but saying yes to things, planning for things, having future vision around things. I'm constantly reminding myself that if it was to all end tomorrow, would I be okay with my decisions today? And even though the mess of life creeps in all the time and it's never going to look perfect, I can confidently say that that's my kind of lens for life and living. And that is, I think, a direct result of losing both of my parents too young. Yeah, for sure.
And I think that is the gift, isn't it? That is the gift of grief. That is the gift of death.
Yeah.
That it encourages those that are still here, that if we can not rise above it, but take it with us and move along with it.
Yeah.
That is the positive, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely.
The silver lining,
agree.
if we like silver linings.
And look, again, I note the discomfort in any of the positive language around the idea of death or grief being any kind of gift, and it really isn't a gift in the normal way that we perceive a gift. But if we can lean in, and it takes time, I'm not saying you're going to feel lucky or motivated to live your life days, weeks, months, years after losing someone, but I think if you can lean into it being a normal part of our existence and not the key factor that drives the way we live our life, and that would be with great sorrow in our hearts, then if we can shift that perspective, I think that's living, that's being human.
Yep, yeah. I agree. And as I was trying to figure out a name for this podcast, I sent a survey out to some of my lost mum friends, and one very dear friend particularly was like, I don't like any of the suggestions of meaning or that it's a gift. And I completely agree now that you've said that. Absolutely, because it doesn't always, death and losing someone doesn't always have to result in some sort of epiphany or meaningful thing. But I guess if you can make it the silver lining of life.
Yeah. It's how we sort of shift our focus and adapt the idea of loss and grief. It's not necessarily a direct result of it, is it?
Agreed.
It's like we mould ourselves to embody and take on that deep sorrow and sadness, but it doesn't mean we need to live in a state of continual sorrow and sadness, that we can counteract some of those feelings by perhaps drawing on more zest for particular aspirations, or to have a goal just to do something new, or to step outside of your comfort zone.
That's right. It can just be in little pockets.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be some sort of thing that's embodying and encompassing every day, every single day of your life.
Exactly. Yeah. And like some days it's not a gift at all.
No.
Like you've really off that this has happened, and how dare life throw this at you. And I know you would have felt like that, and I think going through some changes that a 50-year-old woman does, I've been like, where is my mum? Like, I just need to have these conversations, and she is the only one that's going to understand me and my response to these things. So yeah, not every day's gift worthy for sure.
No, absolutely. So picking up on some of the things that have helped you through humour, definitely.
Yeah.
And that sense of spirituality.
Yeah.
What else has been helpful in your journey and continuing journey of grief?
It's a great question. It's kind of basic stuff in a way. It's just one foot in front of the other, and having some self-compassion to make mistakes along the way, and to allow yourself to feel the way you feel on any given moment. I think in the lead up to this podcast, I was just actually going through my text messages with Mum. And you know, when you look at text messages that you've got this conversation between you, this is on an iPhone at least, you can look at all the photos that you've shared between each other, and some days I can do something like that and take such strength from it, because it's really beautiful, normal, everyday conversational stuff that it's just the normal parts of life that we were able to exist and coexist in together. And going down those sort of memory roads sometimes is really special for me. Mother's Days and Christmases and birthdays, they're not the points at which I need to do particular things or remember or can be helped through particular ways of being on those days. They're not that important to me. But in an everyday sense, I think what helps is just not shying away from the fact that we lived a life together or with each other in it, and trying, I think, to, because it's my mum and my dad, my parents are my sort of key loss stories, reflecting on how I parent is something that I can do to help me get through some of those things too, or that thinking. Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit of a waffly, ambivalent response to that question. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything particular. I think my deep sense of thinking that they're here with me is a really great one for me, and it might not resonate with everybody, but feeling that interconnectedness is continually helpful.
Anatomically, they are.
Yeah.
You are 50-50 them.
That's right.
So they are absolutely present. And I love the concept of, for anyone that has experienced a miscarriage or a baby loss, that we still hold their DNA in us.
Absolutely.
For, 21 years or something. It's microchimerism or something
That's
like
right.
that.
I read about that recently. That's impressive.
It's
bodily
amazing.
function, isn't it? Yeah.
So to know that we hold them within us,
Yes.
but then absolutely you hold your parents within you every day.
And look, it might be helpful for some people to have photos up, or to engage in the normal rituals where we celebrate people's birthdays, Mother's Days, all those sorts of things. But I guess my approach is just about the everyday.
I find that refreshing to hear, because I personally often hold, I think, a bit too much weight on anniversaries and birthdays and those milestone days and those hallmark days of Mother's Day. And, you know, Mother's Day is an absolute cluster of emotions for me. Yeah. But I probably shouldn't always hold so much weight in them, because it's just another day.
I mean, it is, but your lost journey is different to mine, and even though it's the idea of mothering and mothers and being a mother, I think where you're at with it is okay too. And if anniversaries is something that prompts a release of grief or some more processing of the feelings that you have, then so be it. That's great. And you and I have had a giggle because I'm not very good with dates. So I think initially I told you Mum died 8 years ago, but she didn't. She only died 6. So, you know, it's probably not where I'm going to hang my hat on how to celebrate things, because I can't bloody remember. Perhaps that's grief's fault too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I know, that's refreshing to hear. In reflecting, do you think that grieving in your 20s is different to in your 40s?
Yeah, it totally is. Again, I think the embodiment of things that I've experienced since losing my dad to when I lost my mum, having children, moving internationally, just all the different parts of life that come at you. I just didn't have that on board in my 20s when I lost my dad. And potentially that's why that sense of embodiment of loss and grief that I had this new skill or new information, was because I was only 24. Even though you're 24 and you've done some growing, you haven't got a lot on board in reflection to where I'm at now. So I think it was very different. There was a naivety to how I experienced it with my dad, and I think it's much more layered as however old I was when Mum died.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think I want to acknowledge the anticipatory grief that you've had to experience in both scenarios. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really big one. And I think preparation-wise, when Dad was dying, that anticipatory grief was a lot less charged for me. I knew he was going to die. I knew I didn't really want to be there when he died. I felt like that was just too physical. We had a beautiful last supper in his room the night that he died, but my brothers and I decided to leave the room before he passed away, and it was such a warm feeling in the room that night, and it was just such a beautiful, memorable event. And he died really quickly after we left. We all said, it's okay for you to go now, and he died quickly. So it wasn't clunky. It was peaceful. We were together. Yeah, there was an air. It was celebratory in some way. Whereas for Mum, I think because of that trauma associated with the pain that she was in and the physicality of her, I mean, every cancer journey's physical. I'm not saying it's not, and it's awful, and there's anticipatory grief, but she wore her pain and her process of dying so evidently and clearly in the physical realm that I guess in some ways my anticipatory grief was around, I can't wait till you die because this is awful for you and all of us, and you're in pain and I don't want to watch that anymore. But also, please don't go because I don't want to be grieving you and I want you around. And I even now have anticipatory grief for my friends who are yet to lose their parents or yet to lose anyone that's very close to them, because I know what that feels like. In my experience, theirs will feel different to mine, of course, but that longing and that desperation, you just don't want anyone to have to go through those sorts of things. So yeah, it's multifaceted, that anticipation of someone dying and the grief that you'll feel. It's a fully loaded feeling.
It certainly adds a layer of trauma, and that's not to say that a sudden death isn't traumatic, because that is absolutely traumatic, but there's a protracted layer of trauma that comes with watching someone slowly die and in pain.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, that anticipation is both hurry up and also don't go, which is
confusing.
It's a really rotten one to be part of.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, it's not easy. And I guess that probably plays out in lots of people's experiences of death and dying. And even after the point of death and you're experiencing grief, you know that grief's not going anywhere, not for a lifetime, and that it's going to show up in multiple ways, sometimes at really inopportune moments. And that anticipation is always with me too, that it might be one day I'm completely fine, or on Mother's Day I'm absolutely okay, and then other years might be really a wailing mess.
Yeah. What hasn't helped through the journey?
I've been quite lucky not to have any expectations placed upon me in how I process these things. There's some clunkiness in dealing with the outcomes of the loss of someone, practically speaking. So it's not helpful to have to sign off on bank accounts, and those things just get in the way of grieving. But I was fortunate because Mum was really organised and had everything lined up and spoke to us really openly about what needed to happen afterwards. So that was all okay. I don't know conceptually what's not helpful. I think I could give myself a really hard time if I chose to around some of the parts of Mum's dying process. But self-compassion is really important there. Yeah. So I think on an irrational day, it's not helpful for me to give myself a really hard time about that day. Mum was in pain and I asked her if she was and she winked, and it's like, well, what can I do about that? Or not feeling like I wanted to show up as her carer, that I just wanted to be her daughter and I just wanted to bring her grandchildren around. But yet my brothers and others stepped in with a really huge capability to be carers for Mum, and that guilt stayed with me for a very long time. So the layers of emotions and guilt is a big one, is not helpful in my experience.
And is that because of the societal rules, do you think, that we feel are imposed on us being the daughter? Did you feel that was what was...
Yeah, massively. Yeah. And like not from my family, but just in general, there's a gendered nature of how we go about death and dying, and the role that we might play in our caregiving capacities.
How did you find going back to work? Was there anything that you perhaps would have done differently, or would you recommend?
I think if you're able to have an openness about where you're at, about what's happened and where you're at, and I'm not saying you have to disclose everything, just what you choose to disclose is personal, and that's up to you. I think I've shared with you in the past that I had a job interview 3 days after Mum died and I told the interview panel prior to the interview, I didn't want to walk in and say, yeah, my mum just died 3 days ago. I told them that that's what had happened and that I felt completely confident that I'd be able to get through that interview, but if something derailed it, that potentially it was a wave of emotions and that we could work through that together. I think the going back to work thing's an interesting one, and even just going to the shop to get milk is an interesting one, because you feel like everything needs to come to a standstill, and there's a deep lack of understanding about why not everyone's just stopped to think about the death of your mother. But this is the normal part of loss and grief, is that it does happen to everybody eventually, and life does just go on, and that feels really mean in the moment.
Were you angry about having to go and do that interview when you wanted the world to stop?
I think I was still in this denial, safe part of my grief, because Mum wasn't in pain anymore. So I felt less anxious, more rested, and I think that's the only reason I felt like I could get through a job interview. And it was a job I really wanted too, and because I had this sense that Mum's still with me, I'm like, if you don't get me this job, like, I'm going to have a word with you.
But she got you the job,
she
didn't she?
Did, yeah. Excellent. She was totally because of her. I think being open about it and transparent where it's comfortable, just to let people know. If you need to just sign out of stuff, just do it. No one else can be responsible for this stuff. You need to kind of take the lead on it and let people know without fear of judgment that, I just can't do today. I'm really sorry, but I just can't do today. And you don't even need to say why. You just need to say, I have to step out.
But we're so bad at talking about it in the Western world, aren't we? And we're so awkward about talking about it in the workplace. Like, can you think of, is there something that pops into your head about the absolute wrong thing someone said to you? Or were you quite lucky that...
I kind of was lucky. I guess the loss of a parent is a normal thing to expect. It's part of that code and the order of things. I imagine that the loss that you've experienced and the incomprehensible nature of that for most of us must have led to a lot of clunky moments.
I could do a whole episode
Oh my
on that one
gosh,
day.
you probably should. Here's what not to do, people. And like you and I have had our own experience of that, and I just want to recount, not because it was me doing my best work, but when I saw you in a shop after that loss, and I just wanted to say, I know what's happened to you and I'm deeply sorry, and this is going to feel awkward, and if you don't want to talk about it right now, then I didn't say that to you, but I just knew that if it wasn't the right thing for you to go through in that moment in that shop with me, you would have just been able to walk away or tell me to piss off or whatever.
I loved you saying that. I loved you acknowledging it. It sticks in my mind as an important part of being seen and being heard.
Yeah. And I guess to take on as the person who does the approaching of someone who's been through great loss and trauma is to, like, you're not going to know how to do it. You're not going to have the right words to say, but it's so much better to approach it than to do nothing. I knew you well enough to go, I see you on the socials. I absolutely know what's happening, and I want to front up and say, I see you in this, and that is okay. I think if there's one thing that comes from thinking about grief and loss is having grief and loss conversations, even when it's super raw for someone in their life.
Absolutely. And I always liken it to a physical injury. If someone you know has a broken arm, you generally inquire.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, exactly.
So suddenly lost a significant, or sometimes not even that significant, we can still experience deep sadness and loss from, like, our favourite customer at work, for example, or a famous person that we've resonated or connected with.
Yeah.
We can all have those really significant losses.
Yeah.
And then for that not to be acknowledged, I always find it so odd how we just shy away from it, and we're so uncomfortable with the discomfort of it.
Yeah.
But actually our discomfort pales in comparison to what that person is feeling.
Absolutely. And I think the key, I'm just unpacking it as we're having this conversation. It's vulnerability, isn't it? We're so afraid of being vulnerable, or the thought of making someone else feel vulnerable. And it's going to be so scary in a minute, because Bianca might start crying, and I don't know her that well, so what am I going to say? This is where we need to lean into the discomfort and the mess of life. I think if there's one thing that can come from interactions like that is a new confidence that stepping outside of your comfort zone and acknowledging a part of someone's life in a vulnerable moment is a beautiful thing to be able to do, not just for that person to feel seen, but for yourself as a growing human.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And if we keep having conversations about grief and loss, those interactions are going to get so much easier.
That's right.
I mean, they're always going to be scary.
Always.
If we normalise that level of vulnerability around death and dying, then I think we can grow as a civilization around these things, particularly in the West.
That's right. I even, when I go to offer my condolences perhaps to another lost mum, I overthink what I'm going to say. I worry that I'm going to say something wrong.
Yeah.
But we just need to acknowledge it, and if we get it slightly wrong, that's the better option than not saying anything at all. It's the right option.
It is the right option, even if you get it wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lots of rights and wrongs.
Lots of rights and wrongs.
Is there a book or a resource that has helped you or helped you feel seen?
Now I'm going to out myself, really, because I've got so many books on mediumship, and just went down that rabbit hole for a little while after Dad died. I know that this work has now been not critiqued, but I think built upon. So the stages of grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I think it was her initial body of work. I did see a grief counsellor after Dad died, quite a couple of years after. That counsellor gave me several resources that were super helpful. One of them actually was the idea of writing narrative around both your feelings, that point of connection you had with the person that you might have lost. expressing your aspirations for what life might have looked like but hasn't ended up that way. That was a really helpful thing for me to go through, and I did keep a journal for a long time after having some counselling and therapy. Those things have been helpful, I think, just to wrap some research or just therapeutic interventions that other people have used that work, because it can spiral. It was interesting for me, 2 years after Dad died, I'd moved back to Tasmania and I was at university, and I became really upset with the world and with my position in it. And I even gave myself a hard time at that point. It was like, oh, it was 2 years ago that he died, so clearly not that. What else is going on? And it wasn't until I'd had some psychological support that that person said, have you considered that this might be part of your grief response? Again, that early 20s version of me and my response to grief. I didn't know that grief was something that just continued on through life, but might shift in its manifestation. That was the kind of first port of call for learning that.
It's really interesting. And I think that's why we are so bad with grief in the Western world, because we think that we're just going to, that's happened and then we move on.
That's right.
And I know as grievers, most grievers hate the term moving on.
Oh,
we move forward.
We do.
And
sometimes we go backwards.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. The kind of internet dad of grief, David Kessler.
Yes.
His grief.com, his website. That's not endorsed, but he's got some really great resources out there, and he's written some amazing books. And he and most of the grief world will agree that early grief is termed as 2 years. That's early grief.
Yeah. It's early.
2
early.
years.
Yeah, I know.
And most people we see walk down the street think that within 4 weeks or 2 weeks, like, how's work? Talking about life as though it's just back to the normal, inverted commas, normal. And that's not right. 2 years we think is a long time, but actually in the loss of that person, it's not.
It's such a short amount of time. And again, I think that asking of the key questions like how's work, or the idea that you should somehow be moving on, is a lack of ability to be vulnerable again. It's a lack of ability to feel discomfort or the potential discomfort of the person that you're speaking to. And what you'd rather do in your mind is fix it. So you're like, oh yeah, surely you've moved on then. Oh, you're back at work. That's great. I think they're probably not judgments, moreover, than they are of just an inability to be sitting with discomfort again. 2 years is early and it doesn't go.
No, it never does.
No. Sorry, people.
We can perhaps grow around it. I love the concept of, there's a few illustrations and memes you can find of there's a hole, and that the hole size never changes, but you grow around that. And I need those visual cues sometimes.
Yeah, they're helpful.
Yeah, to conceptualize it and to think about it, and I guess like absorb it.
Yeah.
And I can think about, yep, I've got that hole in me. I'll always have that hole, but I have grown around it.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've just come back to that thought and this idea and perhaps problem that we both have with the gift of death and dying and of grief. And I think what you've just helped me unpack for myself is that feeling I had after Dad died, that I've got something extra. I think my body was just adapting around that hole, and that felt new. And my sense of reflexivity around that felt new. So I think that's right. It's your ability to adapt and shape shift with this thing called grief and this hole in you. And never any time should it mean that you're moving on or ready for something. And in fact, it might change your whole direction in life. Who knows?
My last question for you today is, if you could go back and say something either to comfort yourself or to let you know you'll be okay, what would you say to yourself in those really dark moments of losing your dad, but probably more so your mum?
Yeah, more so mum, because it's more recent and I was older and had more experience on board. And it's really simple for me and my experiences: do not sit in guilt. Do not stay there. That is not serving you. And you will find that does not serve you at all well. That's not part of the adapting and growing around grief that needs to be aligned with that part of your process. Just try and unpack that connection to guilt and get some help on that one. I'm such a massive advocate for the benefits of psychological assistance in whatever form that takes. I needed help, and I needed help to shift the guilt because I stayed there too long.
It's a really beautiful piece of advice, and I think we all it's a great one. I think if anyone's experienced a traumatic grief as well, there's usually often that feeling of guilt.
Yeah. What could I have done better? Did I do enough?
Yep.
Sorry I didn't do that. I'm sorry I didn't feel like I wanted to be your carer. All of those things hang around, and they can be really negative in their manifestation in the long term, even just the short term. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Melody. It's been a wonderful chat.
It's just really great to normalise the conversation and actually to hear about people's experiences of grief and loss. And it's just never a bad question to ask. If someone says, oh yeah, my mum died, if you've got a moment, how was that for you? What was your connection like to your mum? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about her. It's okay to see someone who's lost a baby and approach them and say, I'm really sorry that's happened, and I just want to say that to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to talk about them, because actually once we've lost them, we lose those opportunities to talk about them and reflect and think about them, because life just gets busy and, the world is spinning around us.
Of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Joining me to unpack the last interview is Dr. Maya Franston. She is a psychologist, health behaviour change consultant and researcher based in Tasmania. She earned her PhD in psychology in 2012 and is internationally recognised for her work in promoting health behaviour change using incentives. Dr. Franston is the owner of Trig Psychology, a private practice located in Tasmania, where she focuses on health behaviour change, working with first responders, adolescents and adults navigating significant life transitions. Her approach is characterised by authenticity and pragmatism, drawing from her varied life experiences. She uses a range of psychological treatment paradigms to get the best outcome for her clients. In addition to her private practice, Dr. Franston serves as a psychologist in schools and is an associate researcher at the University of Tasmania. Her research primarily focuses on smoking cessation, particularly among pregnant women, and has led Tasmania-wide clinical trials exploring the efficacy of novel incentive-based interventions. Having stepped away from active research, Maya's passion project is science communication and can often be heard on ABC Radio sharing mental health hacks. Originally from Denmark, she has called Tasmania home since 1994. Beyond her professional pursuits, she enjoys engaging in outdoor adventures, endurance sports, and travelling both locally and abroad with her sons. Welcome, Maya.
Hello, Bianca.
How amazing and what an incredible outlook on life has Melody got.
So much to unpack and discuss. How long have we got?
As long as you like. Maya, let's start with what came up a couple of times, which was the concept of a gift in grief, and how we've both grappled with the concept of it, and that we kind of don't want it, but it is a gift. And some people don't like the term silver linings in loss, and I completely understand that. So I'd love your take on it and your experience.
Yeah, that did get me thinking a lot, and how I would go about explaining that, and do go about explaining that to people who are uncomfortable with that sense of, and maybe feel guilt or struggle with that term of gift, because that's right, it's in our vernacular, isn't it, the silver lining. And I think the first thing I would say is, if you're even having that thought, it means you're probably on the right track to seeing that there is feeling guilty that potentially you might, out of this horrific situation, grow, or something positive might come out of it. So the fact that you're there and feeling a cognitive dissonance, if you like, about that, feeling discomfort in that, it means you're probably on the right track. Because the alternative is all the other people out there who don't deal with it, who don't see there as being a possibility of this actually having any benefit. And so I love a metaphor, right? And so I was thinking about this in terms of what we would do if this was a physical sense, or even something that was not human. Mm-hmm. So if you have rotten floorboards, do you go damn, I've got rotten floorboards, let's just put a rug over that and pretend it's not there. Absolutely an option. But what's probably going to happen out of that is it'll continue to rot and you're going to fall through the floorboards, right? Not great. The alternative is go, damn, that's happened, and I can either leave it to fester or, look, let's renovate. There's a hole here, let's fix it, let's make it better. Now, I know that that's probably not a great... But the other thing I think of, especially with mental health, it's great with clients. They're much more comfortable talking about the physical health, right?
Yes.
And maybe in the same thing, like especially working with people, I myself use exercise and moving my body as a way of coping. And when I get an injury and working with people who have injuries, that is such a challenge, right? Because they're relying on that to do their thing and whatnot. And so what they can do is to ignore the injury and just keep on doing their thing and making it worse. Or they can give it the rest they need. But to do that, they have to build the mental resilience and come up with other coping strategies and other tools and avenues to explore to be able to cope with that. And I think people who are good athletes, people who have gone through trauma and loss, it gets easier and better each time. Maybe not easier, but they have a much larger skill set of being able to cope because they've been there before and they've seen and they understand the things that they can do. You know, I've done a knee or whatever, and I know that I can do all these other things that I can also enjoy at the same time, even with that. So that was very long-winded. The other thing I'd like to say is that humans like to attach meaning to everything, right? And I wonder if it would be beneficial to separate the loss, if it's a person, an animal, an identity, a relationship, separate that from the whole that it's created. And I think in doing that, and a lot of the time there is no choice, that thing has occurred. But the choice you have is, what can I do with what is here now? And that's separate to what's happened. So what can I do with this pain? And I can either work hard and grow from that, or I can bury it and I can guarantee it'll pop back up. Yeah.
I think one of the quotes I've enjoyed getting my head around is that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Is that sort of what is that really dumbing it down saying?
No, when you said that, I went straight back to my military days, and I'm pretty sure that's what they did say to us. No, do you know what they said? Like, pain is weakness leaving the body. No, that's not appropriate in this context. But absolutely, and I think certainly in the DBT models and things like that, this sense of radical acceptance, which it seems scary because the concept of radical acceptance is, as it sounds, it's like you can't do anything about the thing that's just happened. And that can be really scary to kind of just let go. It's like, well, I don't have control over that. But actually a massive relief comes from that, of going, cool, that thing's happened.
Yep.
This relationship's over. Whatever it is, that person is now not here. But what can I control? The choice is, can I grow from this? Can I learn from this? And I think where to start with most people is, how do you ensure that you never feel this same pain ever again?
And I guess we inevitably will learn and grow because of that experience. That's what you're...
It's definitely not inevitable. Again, is it a choice? I think some people have the resources to grow mentally and materialistically or whatever. It helps if you can talk to a psych. It helps if you've got good friends. So I do think it's a choice to a certain extent, but it's not one everyone takes.
Yes.
Absolutely not. Certainly not straight away. Later on, there's almost a sense of, well, I need to face all those hurts along the way because now it's having a massive impact on my life. But no, certainly not everyone does do that, and that's where you get PTSD and such like that.
It's such a spectrum, isn't it, of coping skills, coping mechanisms, and there's a spectrum of everything in life. And I think when people get really frustrated with the silver lining sort of concept and that everyone needs to turn their grief into a foundation or something is because we see what the 1%ers, the 5%ers that have been able to grow and learn from it and evolve and change. And there's millions of other people that we don't see.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing there is we humans we receive comfort in meaning. So we feel better if we feel like something was for a reason or there is meaning. I mean, we're not going to get theological in this, but it makes us feel better. But of course, the flip side of that is, does it then put pressure on you? Do people feel pressure to create meaning where maybe there is none?
Where does that come from? Like, is it a deeply ingrained psychological thing from being told stories as we have come out of the womb, and what is it?
It's beyond that. It's further back than that. So it's humans don't like uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So because uncertainty means death.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I suspect that's where it comes from. And we're only alive here because we have this incredible little thing in our brain that goes threat, run away, or not even that. It's like different, run away or kill it. So we are as successful a species as we are because we've gotten really, really efficient at clumping. And I don't think it's necessarily a great thing, but we are efficient in quickly being able to go, oh, that person looks dodgy, so let's cross the street. Or that person looks nice because they're making eye contact and they're dressed well and they've brushed their teeth. I'll hang out with them. So we've got really quick at that. There is a reason why we still are afraid of stuff that rationally doesn't make sense. Why are we still afraid of spiders and sharks and stuff? Sure, if you fall into the ocean, but there are still people who are afraid of that. We should be afraid of cars and PowerPoints.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're not because of evolution. We haven't caught up. So we as humans are wired to be scared of and avoid uncertainty. Yeah. And so to do that, we create meaning out of stuff because it puts us at ease.
And is that part of why trauma and the surprise in trauma and often grief is because it doesn't work with the working model in our brain of, say, an assault? That's what came to mind, of someone who looks safe and actually they've harmed you. And that goes against what working model we have in our brains.
Oh, there's so many things. I'm going to write stuff down because as what you said then it brings up lots of things. So firstly, I think the way I explain trauma to the people that sit on my couch is not with psychological words because I can't remember most of them. But a trauma is basically something that's happened to you in the past that was so shocking to your system that it didn't make sense out of it. And so it doesn't realise that it was back then and not now because you have stored that event as fragments of experience. So fragments of the big one being the emotion that you felt at the time, which was probably most of the time it's fear, it's shock, it's shame or whatever it is. So there's the emotional response that is now absolutely imprinted on your system. And the reason it's there and the reason we can't do anything about it is because your body has gone, we have to remember this moment or remember that thing because we can't have it again. So there's the emotion, the physiological response we had at that time, the sights, the smells, the sounds. And so trauma, by definition, the thing was so big we didn't have the ability and the resources to process it and deal with it at the time. And so part of therapy is to help that person build that picture, put that puzzle of emotions and feelings and thoughts back together and situate that in that time so that it's no longer seen as a current threat. It's something that was back then, not now, and that they're now safe.
Yeah, and I think we could do a whole big episode on trauma and talking about that more in depth. And my understanding is that even the neuroscience behind it is that actually the part of our brain that is the timekeeper does go offline, which is our prefrontal cortex areas. The amygdala lights up. That's the fear center. There's so much that happens, and it is the experience and the effect as opposed to just the event, because I think a lot of people still have the misconception that trauma only happens to people in war or it's only an assault or a car accident, and actually it can be from an incident of bullying when we were a child. It could be witnessing something else. Explanations in some professional books that are meant to be a resource for trauma, and they don't address baby loss. It doesn't address grief. It doesn't address a spouse's really traumatic and prolonged cancerous death. And then people go, oh, well, what I experienced, that mustn't have been trauma.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It's so much more than what some textbooks can acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about the anticipatory grief.
Oh, man, and I was listening to Melody, and we're all empaths. That's why we're here doing these podcasts, right? But I was feeling it for a minuscule amount of what she was experiencing too. But she had so kindly told us the story of her experience with her father, and then it's like, oh, and then would you like to tell us what happened with your mother? And you could feel it. You could just go, oh man, here we go again. And Melody puts it so beautifully to talk about that, and back on what we just talked about in terms of trauma and what it is. It's a collection of emotions and visceral feelings, right? And so Melody had a really good kind of blueprint of what that felt like to lose a parent, and then to face that again. Of course, her body went, oh, we've been here. This is dangerous. Mm-hmm. This is stuff that we should be avoiding. Mm-hmm. And so her system basically hit the go button of going, here we go again. Are we going to be able to cope? What resources have we got? And so naturally our systems will do that. And I think the interesting part of that is it doesn't always serve us well. And certainly that's where, speaking to a professional, if you find anticipatory grief or that response coming in, of course you will, definitely seeking support, because while your system, your amygdala, whatever, it's preparing you for what it thinks is going to come next. Especially in Melody's case, where there was a few years of supporting mum and mum going through her experience. That's a long time to be in that fight or flight mode, right? And yet I see it, and I'm just thinking of some other clients of similar thing, of the shock and grief of being delivered news about their own or someone else's terminal illness. And it's so hard to reconcile with themselves these ongoing grief, because it doesn't end. It's just ongoing. And I think that sense of radical acceptance again that we spoke about, of knowing that this will happen, but then choosing how you're going to be and respond and be with that person in the meantime. But man, that takes some work. And I think what was really interesting about what Melody spoke about was how she was in a different stage of her life. And even if it had been exactly the same experience, and of course it wasn't, because she's in a different time of her life, different responsibilities, different priorities. She was mum for the second time. And I know this is coming to a different point, but that sense of her doing a stock take and going, how much can I invest in this? How much can I be there to support mum? How much can I give? Because actually my circle, my locus of control and where I need to be for me is with my immediate kids. I need to protect them. And in so doing that it's instantaneous check of herself to go, how much I need to be able to cope with this for my kids. So I guess I would say it's real, it'll happen, and it's your body's adaptive way of protecting you from what it thinks it knows is going to happen next, and how hard that's going to be. And that's okay, but maybe also to get some support around that, because it might not be an adaptive reaction.
Yep. So would it be to try to self-regulate as much as possible and to put boundaries in place so that you will survive, basically?
Yeah. I mean, every context is going to be different, isn't it? The work I would be asking my client to do is to acknowledge that there is that anticipatory response, and to thank your body, basically going, yep, cool. I can see why you're reacting, because this was really hard last time. I acknowledge that. Thank you for that response. It's totally. And then to pep yourself up and go, this might be different. We don't have all the answers yet. Things could be different. I've got new mechanisms to work on. We learned some great mechanisms last time. So, of course, your initial reaction is to get the fighting irons out to protect yourself. And the same as it's that physiological response, the initial one, which sends those chemicals in your bodies to go, there's a threat, boom, and then all the chemicals go through your body to like fight, flight, to acknowledge that, let it come down, and then go, right, so this could be different.
It's almost a very IFS, an internal family systems approach. Is that what you would?
Yes. To be grateful. Open the door for warrior Bianca, warrior Melody to say, I'm pleased you've arrived. I was expecting you. Come on in. However, leave your pike and your bow and arrow at the door, just, it's all right, come in, have a glass of wine.
Yes.
Let's just analyse. Let's have a look at. But that takes time, right? I definitely think internal family systems can help with that. And do you know why I think it works so well? We are so much better at caring for other people and empathising for others. So if we can view ourselves as being multiple personalities, and I think most of us can appreciate that, to go, hey, here's Warrior Maya, she's rocked up. No worries, come on in. But sit down, relax, and we might not need you.
And internal family systems seems to be getting a lot more traction in Australia now and recognised as a really effective trauma and mental illness and all sorts of thing therapy. Can you give us a very quick synopsis of what internal family systems is?
Okay, so it was really interesting, came up recently actually. So it's not something I learnt at uni because it was very off flavour. It was probably as much off flavour as anything to do with Freud was. But my understanding of internal family systems is the idea that we as individuals are made up of lots of little people, lots of little personalities, if you like. There might be the manager who's really switched on, frontal lobes buzzing, can analyse things, can see things in analytically, black and white and all that sort of stuff. They're not the best person you want around if you want to comfort a child. Then you've got the nurturing person. Then you've got the fun Maya who might go back and dance on the tabletops and stuff when she was in her prime, whatever. And then you've got, as we've discussed, we've got the warrior Maya. You've also got the worrying Maya. She's in there too. So you've got all these different personalities and they're all useful for different times. And so in trauma, especially if the trauma's happened as a child or if the trauma is maybe wrapped up in stuff to do with your childhood or the way that you were modelled or nurtured or whatever, it's much easier to understand and forgive. And because we are really good at empathising with other people and we're actually really good at empathising with young people, but even young animals, right? We all have an extra place in our heart for innocent babies, children. Where in trauma it's really, really handy is because then to rationalise how you're experiencing the world now when you look through the lens of yourself as a child. And so if that happened to you as a child, we know that victims of sexual violence and stuff like that, as adults they might still hold on to this sense of guilt. This is getting heavy, but like guilt that maybe I led that adult on.
Yes.
Or, guilt that I was the reason because I was a naughty girl that mum and dad split up. And then from an IFS point of view, you can work with that client to go, well, now let's go back and let's have a look at how you as a child, that, little Maya might have experienced that world. And of course she experienced it like that because that was her understanding at the time. And the interesting thing is, even though we're adults in a situation like that, we're actually still feeling like that. And even though I don't use IFS as the brunt of my work, I pick from lots of different things. I think where it comes out a lot is in terms of our parenting. It's really interesting to go, well, how were you parented? How did you perceive the world? And especially to do with attachment and things like that. Super, super interesting. Definitely recommend people have a look at it because it can be really helpful and so much easier to grapple with than some of the other more boring things like CBT.
Yes, and I've seen incredible results and perspectives change and complete reprocessing in amongst EMDR as well, of weaving in IFS into therapy has been incredibly effective for my husband and for other friends. If people want more information out there's some other really great podcasts that talk about it. I'll link one in the show notes, but I think it's a really great therapy that is worthwhile having a look at.
Yep, absolutely. I think one of the things that jumped at me when I was listening to Melody is the word wisdom sprang to mind, and it's kind of related to that conversation we had around gift or the silver lining, right? And we've kind of talked about it, but the wisdom and the sense of hope that I kind of just want to sit on for a bit in terms of anyone listening to this podcast, whether they're going through their own, they're supporting someone who is going through a grief process, or they're interested, or they're preempting when it happens to them. I guess I just wanted to offer that sense of hope for you that if you're already listening to this, chances are that you're already exploring. You're already looking at, well, how can I learn from this? How can I avoid feeling like this again? And you absolutely can, because next time, and there will be a next time, you will if nothing else, have greater insight into how you're feeling. You won't be as startled by your own reactions. You will probably be more forgiving and be more gentle with yourself and understand that this is how you react and how you respond is outside of, well, how your physiological response, the emotions, you have no control over. They will just happen. And you will know what resources, what supports, what's worked for you last time. Now, they might not work the same this time, but at least you've got a place to start. And I think for people in the midst of it or are about to go through something, just knowing that you will never be back here again. Now, that's not to say that there's not something bigger coming, but you will have more tools this time than you did last time. And I think that inspires hope. You'll have wisdom, right? And I'm sure we all have them, these incredible older men and women in our life. We just go, wow, I wish I had your wisdom. But they've got that because they've gone through this stuff. Yeah.
You can't see, but I'm nodding furiously. And it reminds me of immediately after losing Herb, I connected with an incredible person who's done so much good in this world. But she lost her baby, Tom, 30 plus years ago. And I went and had a cup of tea with her. She very kindly invited me over to her home. And she gave me so much hope because she definitively said, you will find your purpose and you will be okay. Because that was what I needed to hear so much. Like, it makes me teary to think about it because I was looking to all these people. I needed someone to tell me it'll be okay because I didn't feel like it was ever going to be okay. And that was definitely one of the big things that got me through. So thank you for giving that message and for pointing that out, because that is definitely what grieving people need, is someone to actually say that it will be okay. Thank you for listening. This podcast is dedicated to my son Herbert and to all the fellow grievers out there. I'm sorry that you're here. Be kind to others, but mostly to yourself. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to mention that whilst I do have a degree in behavioural science and have spent years educating myself and researching the topics of trauma and mental health, I'm not a licensed therapist, counsellor or psychologist. Everything I share here is based on personal experience and things I've learnt through education. This podcast is for informational or entertainment purposes only and isn't the substitute for professional advice. If you're struggling, please reach out to a GP or a qualified therapist. You're not alone and there is help available.